InShot! Okay, it's happening! Everybody stay calm!
What's the procedure, everyone?
Writing main characters is not for the weak. It can be pretty tough.
There is a fine balance a main character has to have to make them interesting, and it's very hard to do. It's easy to make a side character have one specific quirk and make them super likable and universally loved by audiences. But main characters usually have to have more to them. Otherwise, people would question why they're the main character in the first place. And this makes them way trickier to write. You don't want your main character to have too many flaws because then people will hate them, but you also don't want them to be too perfect because then people will hate them.
I think by far one of the best characters that understood this balance is none other than the self-proclaimed world's best boss, Michael Scott.
Michael Scott is one of the best main characters of all time. And you know what? I'm not even going to talk about Steve Carell's amazing performance in this video, because while yes, it does certainly help boost the character to a legendary status, I want his writing to be the focus of this video, because it's a huge reason as to why this character is so good and allowed the show to have so many seasons.
Let's start by talking about his consistent motivation and how perfect it is for the character and his position.
In my opinion, the most perfect motivation a character can have is something that is focused but has multiple ways of accomplishing it, as it leaves potential for lots of different storylines that still keep the character and his motivations consistent. And the character of Michael Scott is perfect for this because it's really simple what he wants. He just wants to be liked. Ever since very early on in the show, Michael has made it clear that he wants to be the fun boss. He constantly refers back to his old boss, Ed Truck, who was super strict and always seemed to hold himself on a higher level than his subordinates. So he spends the entire series trying to become what he feels a boss should be, one who is liked and can be friends with his coworkers. However, not everyone feels the same way, which is a great way to cause conflict and create new plot lines for episodes. One of the biggest showcases of this is when Jim throws his house party and doesn't invite Michael. You can tell Michael feels very hurt by this because he thinks he's the super fun boss that could hang out with his coworkers outside of work, because he views them as a family. There are even many examples of people undermining his idea that the workplace is a family. When Michael tries to get Stanley back from Karen, he mentions how he's being pulled away from his family. Karen tells him that his family is coming with him, which causes Michael to backtrack and clarify that he meant his work family. Also, an even bigger example of this is when he's talking to Holly about how the office is one big family, and Holly straight up says it's not a family, it's a workplace. Something really interesting is how we never get Michael's full backstory, but it's because we don't need it. The few bits of information they give us tell us exactly who he is, and it's because they're all very consistent with his main motivation: being liked. The writers sprinkle in many bits of information about his past throughout the show. He tells stories of how he was only friends with the lunch ladies at school, and we even see his younger self in the Take Your Daughter to Work Day episode explain that his future goal was to have 1 million kids so he could have 1 million friends, and no one could say no to being his friend. It's pretty dark, but it's perfectly in line with Michael's character. Also, another part of his character revolves around how he always wants to be the center of attention. By far one of my favorite showcases of this is in the episode Dwight's Speech, when Michael tries to teach Dwight how to give a speech before he, just reads a speech from some Italian dictator. When Dwight gets cold feet, Michael tries to salvage the situation, but ultimately fails to recapture the same crowd engagement he had in the past. Then, when Dwight gives his speech and Michael realizes people love it, he just straight up leaves. But he of course still finds the silver lining in it by entertaining Dwight at the bar with a story and saying that he entertained the guy who entertained 1,000 guys. Another huge episode where Michael cares about being in the spotlight is none other than The Injury. At first, he claims that he just wants to be treated like everyone else. However, throughout the episode, he slowly gets angrier and angrier when people aren't giving him special treatment. And then he even gets jealous when everyone cares about Dwight's concussion, but not his cooked foot. So we know Michael has a focused and broad motivation, which already makes the character very compelling, but the incredible writing doesn't stop there.
Now, we have to get to the part of the main character that most people go too far with, the flaws.
Michael has a lot of flaws. There is no denying it. But it isn't something they spring on us all at once. It's another consistency to the character. And in fact, I hope you're picking up on a pattern here with the words I'm saying in this video. Specifically with the word consistent. Consistency is key. And Michael Scott is a great example of this. Someone who, no matter what he does, it can always be justified because it's consistent with his character and motivations. All of Michael's weaknesses stem from his main motivation, his strive to be liked. Because when he doesn't get it, bad things happen. One of Michael's biggest flaws is his immaturity. I think by far one of my favorite showcases of this is during Launch Party when he holds a pizza delivery boy hostage when he won't accept his coupon. There's a lot of subtext here. He isn't really arguing about the coupon, but using it as a way to get his anger out about the situation that happened with Ryan when he doesn't get invited to the in-person launch party. Then when Michael finally gets the spotlight, he uses it as a way to insult Ryan and try and show him up. Oh, and I can't forget another great example of Michael's immaturity being in full force when Charles comes into the picture. In fact, this entire Michael Scott Paper Company arc showcases every aspect of Michael's character perfectly. The Michael Scott Paper Company arc goes so hard for no reason, especially with how late it is in the show. But anyway, when Charles comes into the picture and starts to change the way things are around the office, Michael's immaturity goes to an unholy level. He starts repeating everything he says, which even makes Pam comment on how immature he's being, which is saying a lot because she's literally had to be his babysitter in the past.
However, somehow, these writers are able to take this aspect of him and spin it into a strength of his character.
I seriously have no idea how they did it, but they did. And it has to do with how people underestimate Michael because of his glaring flaws and immaturity, but he finds a way to use it to his advantage. This next bit might sound kind of random to throw in, but it all connects in the end, I promise. I don't know if anyone has ever talked about this on YouTube, so I'm just gonna say it. If you really think about it, Michael Scott and Captain Jack Sparrow are the exact same character. Let me explain. They both are very unconventional main characters with a lot of flaws. They both aren't a part of the main relationship the audience is invested in, and by far the biggest thing that connects them, they both are characters that use the way people perceive them to their advantage. For Jack Sparrow, it always just looks like he's being an idiot, until they just, straight up made him into an idiot. But in the first few movies, he's really not. You can tell he knows what he's doing, which makes his character way more compelling than the caricature they turned him into in the last movie. Now, for Michael Scott, it's the same scenario. While on the outside, he looks like a complete idiot, on the inside, there's much more to him. One of the first examples of this is when Michael and Jan go on a sales call, which, I'm sorry, but can I just say how much of a fantastic character Jan is? Every single episode she is in is a banger. I'm serious. Watch all of the episodes that include Jan and tell me any of them are mid. You can't. But anyway, when they go on a sales call, Michael changes the location of the meeting to a Chili's, claiming that Chili's is the new golf course. Which, by the way, how have they not made merch out of that line yet? But this episode starts off with making the audience think that he's an idiot for changing the location, and of all places putting it in a Chili's. However, as the episode progresses and he's making jokes with the customer, you realize that he did it on purpose to get closer with him and eventually close the sale. It's really the first time in the show we see that there are some layers to Michael. And without this episode, Michael's character would not be what we know it as today. Now, that episode is great and really changed on Michael's character. However, I think an episode that showcases this side of his character even better is the episode Murder. In this episode, they find out that Dunder Mifflin might be going under, and Michael has the spontaneous idea of playing a game. A weird one at that, but it's one that requires all of the characters to roleplay and get as disconnected from reality as possible, which isn't a coincidence. The more and more they play this game, Jim gets really angry that they're wasting time. When Jim finally gets Michael alone to snap at him, Michael snaps back even harder, saying they need this game. It's such a simple line that lets us know everything that's going on in Michael's head. He isn't playing this because he's lost his mind, he's doing it because they need to be distracted from the real issues going on. It's such a good way to make Jim respect Michael even more as a boss, so when he does say that final line of him being the best boss he's ever had, it means something. Throughout all of Michael's flaws, there is a silver lining with his character. For better or for worse, he always cares. A lot. And he will always try. If he didn't care, he wouldn't go out of his way to attack another branch when he loses a coworker to them, or go all the way to the CFO's house to try and convince him not to close the branch.
I think there's a certain line in the show that sums up this character perfectly.
And yes, I would say it is a perfect line, which is something I don't say that often. The line is when Josh, which by the way, I cannot take this guy seriously in Outer Banks since I only saw him as Josh from The Office. But anyway, when Josh leverages his position to get a job at Staples, it cuts to a talking head with Jim. And Jim says one of the best lines in the whole show. He says, "Say what you will about Michael Scott, but he would never do that." This line sums up his character perfectly. In my opinion, A perfect line is something that sums up a character perfectly without completely spelling it out to the audience. And I can only think of a few off the top of my head. "You are without a doubt the worst player I've ever heard of, but you have heard of me" is a perfect line. "I hate losing more than I even want to win" is a perfect line. "Peacemaker, what a joke" is a perfect line. And "say what you will about Michael Scott, but he would never do that" is a perfect line. Just in this short line, it tells us everything we need to know about his character. It acknowledges that he has flaws, but also tells us that when it comes down to it, he cares. Michael Scott is the definition of an unconventional, endearing character. And there is no better character to lead a show for this many episodes than him. It's no coincidence that the show went downhill when he left. And I just wonder if there will ever be a better and more interesting main character than Michael Scott.
Guys, it's been a while since I made a video essay because of all the copyright strikes I got with my Planet 51 video. But those have expired now, so I gotta say, it feels good to be back. So thank you so much for watching.